So welcome to the second EDU 2022 and SUX 2022 Voter Conversations Forum, the first in the new year. We are an informal network of private and public colleges and universities that convened early last year to work on voter registration and education on campuses. The members of this network provided information, motivation, and logistics support programs to their campus communities, especially to first-time voters among students, to enable them to register and thus be able to vote in the May 2022 national elections. After registration, our group is now focusing our efforts at voter education. We have embarked on a series of election-related fora, which we call Voter Conversations. Today's voter conversation is on safeguarding the vote, protecting the ballot, focusing on the electoral process itself. Free and fair elections are the main defining hallmark of a democracy, and the Philippines prides itself in being the oldest democracy in Asia. So let us talk about the May 2022 elections and how free and fair they actually are. There are some concerns. During the voter registration phase of our efforts, while most of the young people were eager to vote and to do their civic duty, there were those who were reluctant. When asked why, reasons given were the risk factors related to COVID-19, the long lines at registration sites, and yes, some doubt and even cynicism about the trustworthiness of the electoral process and about the choice of candidates. This afternoon, we hope to tackle some of these issues. We have invited representatives from the agencies and organizations committed to oversee and guarantee the integrity of the elections: the Commission on Elections, or Comelec, the Constitutional Commission, officially mandated to enforce all laws and regulations relative to elections, volunteer watchdog groups, the National Movement for Free Elections, or NAMFREL, and the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting, PPCRV, and Isambayan, a recently formed broad coalition of groups working for good governance. We are asking the panel to speak on what their agencies or organizations are doing in preparation for the May 2022 elections to ensure the safety and integrity of the vote and the actual count. We have also asked them to share what citizens, particularly the youth, can do to help. First, let us hear from Comelec. Let me start with an explanation and apology for the absence of Commissioner Rowena Guanzon. Commissioner Guanzon did accept our invitation, but later decided, perhaps out of caution, decided it was best to avoid speaking at a large public forum like this while the deliberations on certain high-profile disqualification cases are ongoing. But we are most pleased to have in her place Director James Jimenez, who is a familiar figure to most of us as the public face of Comelec. Director Jimenez heads Comelec's Education and Information Department and is the official spokesperson of the agency. His career in Comelec, which spans almost 2 decades, is highlighted by his continuing efforts to expand the election body's digital media footprint, with the verified Facebook and Twitter accounts of the Commission as early testaments to this. Digital projects such as pagparehistroka.com website are credited to him. Director Jimenez can also be heard on radio, especially during election season, on the Comelec Hour on DZRH every Saturday at 3 p.m. Director Jimenez, please.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Patty, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join you here today. Again, I extend the regrets of Commissioner Guanzon for not being able to join you today, and I hope that I'm able to fill her shoes even for a little bit. So we are going to talk today about protecting the vote, and allow me to share my screen so that we can begin. When we talk about protecting the vote, we are actually talking about a whole lot of things, not just say protecting the ballot, or protecting the integrity of one aspect of the elections. When we say protect the vote, we are in fact talking about a great many things. I will try to give you an overview of some of these things or most of these things, but I do not think that this will be an exhaustive list. It will be exhausting for you for sure, but please bear with me. So today we're going to talk about what the threats are that we need to protect against. And we need to talk also about the protection and mitigation measures that are put in place by the Comelec, side by side with what the public can do. Again, to protect and mitigate against the threats that we are facing. So without further ado, let me go straight to the threats. Well, there are two general broad categories of threats that we're going to talk about. Talk about internal and external threats to the integrity of the elections. Internally, you're looking at low transparency in the election administration body. And there will be instances when people will feel that the COMELEC will not be as forthright as they might want it to be. This is what we call low transparency, and it will constitute an internal threat to the credibility of the elections. The unpredictability of rules will also be a main threat that we have to look out for. Of course, incompetence will always be an issue, as well as malfeasance within the election management body itself, as well as AES issues. We're going to go into this in greater detail as we go along with the presentation, but suffice it to say at this point that this is the overview of what we are looking at, right? These are the internal threats that we foresee and that we have moved to mitigate through the years. Externally, we're talking about a much more complicated tree. External threats include information attacks, or attacks which are based on information. In this category, you have hacking, and hacking also is a very relevant topic today. We're talking about the efforts at disinformation that has proliferated since a long time ago, actually since before the start of this election season even. Now, this disinformation can be targeting candidates, or it can be targeting processes related to the elections. And most often, it is disinformation targeted at the operation of the automated election system, or the AES. Now, contradistinguished from these information-based attacks, you also have tangible threats, threats that you feel the physical effects of. For example, you're talking about threats coming from guns, goons, and gold, the more traditional forms of trying to influence the outcome of elections using bribery, vote buying, intimidation, fear tactics, and so on. Guns, goons, and gold. And then, of course, the threat du jour, COVID. COVID is a tangible threat, as mentioned earlier. A lot of people do have some sort of misgivings about participating in the elections, pointing mainly to the prevalence of the pandemic. But at the same time, we're also talking about physical attacks, both on COMELEC personnel. Some have already actually paid the ultimate price, and physical attacks against the infrastructure of the elections. Here, we're talking about the physical tools that we use to conduct the elections. So these are the things that we're looking at when we talk about threats, both internal and external. Let me try to give you a quick run through of what we've been doing to protect and mitigate against this Again, juxtaposed with what the public can in fact do in this regard. So first, when we talk about internal threats, we also talk about the lack of transparency. Okay? This is not to say that the Comelec is not transparent. We believe that it is, but there will be instances when people feel that we are not being as transparent as we ought to be. In order to mitigate this problem, what the Comelec has done over the past year is to increase the use of live streaming for documentation of all official events. We are moving towards the regime where everything that we do is up for public display so that people will be able to see exactly what the conversations are like behind what used to be closed doors. What the public can do to help this process along is to show that these live streams are actually playing to an audience, right? It is very important that live streams are watched by the public who intends to exercise some sort of oversight over what we, the public servants, do in their name, right? It is also very important to note that these live streams are also hotbeds of comments where people tend to really compete with each other in the comment sections for the attention of both the persons or the people conducting the live stream, that would be us, or the other people in the comment section. As anyone who is familiar with how social media works will tell you, sometimes the comment sections can in fact be more entertaining than the live stream itself. One other problem one other internal threat to the credibility of elections, ultimately, and to the integrity of the electoral process is the perceived unpredictability of the rules. In order to address this, we have reworked Comelec resolutions to plug process loopholes. This will allow us to be more forthright in the sense that if something happens, then people should be able to tell with a high degree of certainty what the consequences of that event will be. But for the public watching the process and paying attention to what we're doing, we would ask that you reject easy narratives and oversimplified dichotomies. One of the most common and perhaps I would say current examples of this is what's going on with the disqualification cancellation cases. A lot of times people feel, or at least they express their frustration at not knowing what's happening, at not knowing what's going on, and about how things are going to progress from a certain point. And this makes them prey to easy narratives where people simply say, if this does not happen, therefore this is what must have happened. This sort of oversimplified dichotomies where people say that if we don't get what we want, then obviously we were cheated or that something went wrong. These things do not help anyone, and all they do is simply compound the problem. So for the public to be able to navigate this problem, they should reject easy narratives and oversimplified dichotomies. As with any other organization, incompetence, of course, is a threat. I'm not saying that the Comelec is incompetent, but in an organization with more than 1,000 employees working all at the same time, it's inevitable that you will see some examples of this. Now, in the Comelec itself, you recognize that there is a possibility that incompetence will creep into the work that we do. And so our chairman and the previous commissioner, the previous commissions have all contributed to strengthening the internal audit department. This creates within our ranks a strong sense of accountability, as well as a very tangible consequence for official misfeasance. Right? The public, of course, is enjoined to participate in this process of accountability by reporting and complaining if they have any reason to do so. Try 8888. It works. It works very well. And you can also try Voter Care. Voter Care is the public assistance hotline operated by the Comelec, essentially to help the public get a handle on problems with the Comelec. Official malfeasance or a deliberate sort of incompetence is also a continuing problem in any organization. And we have tried to mitigate this problem by regularly reshuffling field officials. In fact, just yesterday, we reshuffled provincial level officials to make sure that there is no sense of familiarity with Comelec officials and the people that they are supposed to regulate in the field. Our personal department is strengthened also, leading to the personal department being able to file administrative cases against perceived wrongdoing. Once again, we expect the public to report and to complain when they have reason to do so. And then, of course, there's AES issues. AES issues, I guess you could argue that this is not exactly or exclusively internal, but for this discussion, let's talk about it as something that's integral to the operations of the Comelec and therefore internal to the Comelec. Well, to address AES issues or lingering fears over the credibility of the automated election system, the Comelec has gone all out to address those fears, subjecting, for example, the automated election system to international certification, which was only very recently completed, resulting in a third round of trust build that would ultimately lead to software that is verifiable as being trustworthy and reliable. We are also in the middle of conducting a local source code review where representatives from political parties and various other oversight committees from Congress, as well as from civil society, have been participating in going over the code of the automated election system. So far, this has already borne fruit, especially in response to some challenges to the integrity of the system, where we have local source code reviewers actually manifesting their desire to speak up, to debunk certain fears and speculations about how the system works. Now, moving forward, especially in the process, we also have a random manual audit committee that is gearing up to begin operations immediately after election day, where they will be conducting random manual audits, hence the name, of the election results. Now, even before we get to the elections, we have conducted already 2 mock elections, and we're also mulling the possibility of conducting a third one. These mock elections allow us to shake the system down so that we know where things will go wrong, if they're ever going to go wrong, and we know how to respond to these things cropping up. Now, for the general public, what you can do is, of course, again, report and complain if you see anything wrong. But I would ask you also to familiarize yourself with the AES processes and procedures. Speaking directly to the media, one of the biggest challenges that we face in this regard is the fact that reportage normally focuses only on the existence of a problem rather than the explanations for what appears to be a problematic situation. So basically, the kind of reporting that we've seen in the past simply harps on the fact that something apparently went wrong without going into great detail about how that thing might not actually be a problematic situation, how that could simply be the system working. Again, not enough effort in the past has been expended in that direction. I think it would help everyone if we all did our best to educate ourselves so that we're not hung too much, we're not too focused on seeing things in the worst possible light. Now let's go to the external threats that the system is facing and that we need to protect and mitigate against. Excuse me. All right. First, in terms of external threats, we're talking about information-based attacks, basically talking about fake news. Overall, as a general strategy, the Comelec fights fake with accurate, relevant, and timely information. And we hope that the public will do its own share in rejecting fake news narratives. Of course, one external threat that is very of the moment is hacking. Okay, a lot of people tend to view the word hacking as a shortcut in terms of concepts for a compromised electoral system. We had our problem with hacking in 2016 when our Comelec website was vandalized and some information was taken out of our databases. However, since then, we have undergone massive website hardening, basically putting the Comelec website behind the firewalls of the DICT, being the premier science organization of the country. And of course, we feel very secure within the multiple firewalls erected by the Department of Information Communication Technology. Now, key information databases, such as the lists of voters, are offline. Okay. Now, I want you to remember that because that is basically the biggest sell for these hacking narratives, where they say that databases of voter information have made their way to nefarious persons. But this is not true, because key information databases, including lists of voters, are offline and therefore are not really susceptible to hacking. Now, over all of this, we cooperate closely with the National Privacy Commission and other law enforcement agencies. Now, if the public should spot a vulnerability, I think they should report it. This is the best way for them to participate in protecting and mitigating against this problem. If they spot a vulnerability, they should definitely report it rather than hold it over somebody's head and ask for a bounty, for simply pointing out something that can be improved. Disinformation is a major red flag in the coming elections. Obviously, we're talking about disinformation that's directed against both the candidates as well as the process itself, the electoral process itself, such as reports, for example, that elections will be suspended in certain places, or reports that certain candidates have dropped out of the race when in fact they have not. The biggest tool that we have to fight against this problem, of course, is education. We're talking about media and information literacy education, which the Comelec, particularly my department, has participated in extensively over the past 24 months. My office, the Department of the Education Information Department, conducts its own emergency fact-checking, and we do this in tandem with the social media platforms who have given us assistance in taking down fake news articles. This cooperation with social media platforms has led to a very high turnaround rate for reporting, and we have been able to take down bogus accounts, especially in the last few days when we took down bogus accounts pretending to be Comelec, pretending to be Commissioner Sheriff Abbas, pretending to be myself. Right? The public, we advise to seek out credible sources always. Seek out credible sources and not just rely on the news feed that pushes information to your screen. And you also have to report fake news. Social media platforms do have reporting mechanisms. Please take advantage of those. That will help us clean up the environment. Spread awareness about the fact that fake news proliferates, and not just on social media either. Remember, a lot of people forget that fake news, one of the best vectors or best ways of propagating fake news is through our group chats. The chats that we are in with our friends, with our classmates, with our work fellows. These group chats are actually hotbeds for passing around fake news, among others, because we tend to be hesitant to call each other out when we see fake news. we should not hesitate to call out fake news. We should make sure that fake news does not proliferate in the spaces that we call our own. There's also going to be a whole lot of automated election system disinformation. In the past, I think since 2010, we've been witness to lots and lots of these attempts everywhere. Everything from people saying that that the machines are unable to read UV marks to the same sort of rumor about the machines being able to read UV marks that do not even exist on the page. So you have news reports of the existence of master servers or master machines that are able to override results from legitimate sources, all of which have undergone investigation at one point or another, and all of which have been ultimately discredited. Comelec can only make accurate, relevant, and timely information always available. And we hope to launch a series of webinars on how the AES operates so that the public is more equipped to consume news of this sort intelligently. There are other external threats, of course. We're talking about threats that have physical impacts that can be felt tangibly. Okay, and for this, we will rely heavily on our partnership with stakeholders, with our deputies and other accredited citizens' arms. We are able to work with these groups so that we're able to address anything that the public reports in case of wrongdoing. We are very open to accepting such incident reports. But in terms of external threat, obviously the most prevalent at the moment is COVID. COVID remains a threat to us, both in real terms. People will run the risk of getting sick if they go out and if they're not careful. But also in terms of mind conditioning, where people are being told that it is unsafe to go and vote, right? In the last 6 months, a survey was bruited about as saying that no one would be voting, that only 45% of people would be willing to go out to vote. And yet, the same week that report came out, we were witness the spectacle of people crowding the Dolomite Beach, basically giving the lie to the assertion that people would be afraid to go out in time of pandemic. Regardless of that, however, the fact remains that the Comelec has anticipated that the elections in 2022 will be held under pandemic conditions, precisely saying that we do not expect the pandemic to go away by the time we have to go through to the polls, which is why much of Comelec's planning has been precisely with that in mind. Health protocols are in place at polling places, and we have had several occasions to actually demonstrate this. First, in Palawan during the March plebiscite. Second and third during the simulation and the mock elections, which we completed recently. One of the main features of these protocols, of course, is the creation of isolation polling places, basically voting centers that are equipped to handle people who possibly might be COVID positive, right? At the same time, medical personnel will be present at many voting centers to provide medical assistance to those who might be in need and those who might be suspected of having COVID. Now, approaching the problem from a different angle and taking into consideration that this is the campaign season, in-person campaigning guidelines have been promulgated, as well as we've created an e-rally channel,
Yeah, I saw that.
which was today verified by Facebook, actually, and thank you very much for that. So ultimately, the public will have to act responsibility, comply with all health protocols. When every single one of us acts in a safe manner, then everyone will be safe. As I said earlier, guns, goons, and gold continue to exert their negative influence on the elections, and that's why we have task force Kontrabigay, where we streamline the Comelec's response to reports of vote buying. Now, the thing with vote buying is that you really need cooperation from the public. There is simply no way around it considering the current state of the law. So we need the public to document instances of vote buying safely, of course. We need the public to report instances of vote buying, again, safely. And this is crucial, to complain and to stay on course, to keep on complaining, to be part of the process. A lot of times we've initiated many actions against vote buyers only to have those actions junked by the court simply because the complainant failed to show up. And there's really nothing we can do when that happens, right? We're also cooperating with providers to find a way to solve the problem of electronic vote buying. That is to say, vote buying using e-payment apps. It's slow work because it's a novel field, but we are trying to make headway in that regard as well. And then, of course, there are physical attacks on the process, where you have where we rely almost exclusively on law enforcement. Okay, and the public, we expect, will be able to report this as well, and there will be several channels for that. And so this is what we do, and these are the threats that we're keeping an eye on, and there are more besides. But again, as I said, this is not exhaustive, but it can be very exhausting just thinking of it in these terms. This is the poster for voter care, and on your screen, you have the different channels by which you can reach the Comelec for any sort of assistance, both if you need information or if you're reporting any incident related to the elections. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them after everyone has had a chance to present. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Thank you, Director James. Very clear and thorough as always.
Thank you.
Next, let's hear from the two watchdog organizations. Our next speaker is Augusto Lagman, Chairperson of the National Movement for Free Elections, or NAMFREL. Gus joined NAMFREL as a volunteer in the early days of the movement in 1983 and has been part of its leadership for decades. He is credited with managing the implementation of NAMFREL's automated parallel count, better known as Operation Quick Count, through 10 national elections. Gus is an IT practitioner and has served as president of the Information Technology Foundation of the Philippines and the Philippine Computer Society. Gus, please.
Sir, you're on mute.
Okay. Okay. The topic assigned to me was is shown in the first slide, ensuring the integrity of the vote and the count, and volunteer opportunities during elections. Next slide, please. NAMFREL's vision is to strengthen democracy by helping ensure clean, honest, and credible elections, and to empower the electorate to elect competent and honest public officials whose main reason for seeking public office is to render real public service. Next slide. Next slide, please. NAMFREL is the first election monitoring organization in the world. It was founded in October 1983. NAMFREL introduced the Operation Quick Count in the 1984 elections and implemented the same until the elections of 2007. In 2010, when we automated the elections, obviously we would not be able to outrun an automated counting machine. So we shifted to other functions. In the 1986 snap elections, we were able to gather some 500,000 volunteers and we engaged their services. That was the election with the biggest number of volunteers. NAMFREL became a model for and replicated by similar groups in dozens of countries. And upon their invitation, many NAMFREL volunteers have traveled to these countries to share the NAMFREL experience with them. Next slide, please. Next slide. Following our NAMFREL's program of back one slide. Anyway, the first NAMFREL's programs for citizen engagement and participation in the 2022 national and local elections. Next slide. The first is rebuilding and strengthening NAMFREL's volunteer network. And NAMFREL's volunteer network is organized at the provincial and or city municipal levels, usually based on the Catholic Church's dioceses, to the National Secretariat for Social Action, or NASA. NAMFREL has started consultations with existing chapters and has held about 10 regional consultations so far. Volunteers obviously are non-partisan individuals who may or may not be members of an organization. Next slide. Next slide, please. But there are always challenges in recruiting volunteers. Some active members have declared that they are now supporting local and or national candidates and are therefore already partisan. And also, due to the ongoing pandemic, volunteers who have reached senior age may not be as mobile as they need to be. Recruitment of volunteers below 18 years of age is also a challenge as they are yet inexperienced. Next slide, please. To prepare the volunteers for observation work, volunteers undergo a training program where content is largely based on the implementing rules and regulations promulgated by the Comelec, covering voting center and canvassing center operations. They are also trained on incident monitoring and observation. Of course, they are provided with the necessary tools such as observation forms and other tools. Next slide, please. NAMFREL's projects for the 2022 national and local elections are automated election system monitoring, the open election data, parallel vote tabulation, and the random manual audit. And I shall be discussing them in a few moments. Can we go to the next one? Automated election system monitoring. Okay. This is now ongoing, the monitoring of procurement of election-related equipment, supplies, and services. And upon the invitation of Comelec, we can also monitor the preparation of systems and subsystems, including the test activities at Comelec's Santa Rosa facility. The Santa Rosa facility is where the vote counting machines, servers, and other required electronic devices are stored, prepared, and tested. Obviously, seasoned volunteers are the ones engaged in these activities. Next slide, please. We are also reviewing the source code, and we have fielded 2 volunteers to do the review of the source code of the programs that will be used with the AES, which are election management system, vote counting machine software, canvassing and consolidation system, electronic transmission, and programs of various other servers and devices. Next slide, please. The other activities that are being monitored, that will be monitored before election day, are the trusted bill, December 3, 2021, but that was also done yesterday because there were updates that were included. Field testing, December 14, done. Mock polls, December 29, done. We can expect that we will also be monitoring the pre-logic and accuracy test, the final testing and sealing of the VCMs, which usually occur about 3 days before the elections. Election results transmission system, the preparation of voting precincts and canvassing centers, and also the monitoring of the deployment of the machines, vote counting machines at the voting precincts and voting centers, and the servers to be used during the canvassing and consolidation at the city, municipality board of canvassers and the provincial board of canvassers. Next slide, please. A group of volunteers will be assigned to observe and record the observations, the activities at specific voting centers. This is now on election day, to observe the retrieval of election paraphernalia from the office of the city or municipal treasurer. They will observe election day events and incidents, and at the end of voting operations, they will collect the 27th copy of the election returns. The 27th copy is the copy that is assigned to NAMFREL. We will also observe end of election day activities, including the repackaging of the vote counting machines and election paraphernalia, and also the return of equipment and the election paraphernalia to the office of the city municipal treasurer. Next slide, please. On the night following the voting and counting, and possibly in the next several days, we will observe the activities at the canvassing and consolidation centers. We will retrieve a copy of the certificate of canvass, COC, and the corresponding statement of votes. And then finally, write our observations and submit the same to the Comelec. Next slide, please. There is the other project that we have is the Open Election Data Project. The objective of which is to gather election-related information that will be made available to the public. The Open Election Data Project adheres to Open Election Data Principles, and if you need more information on the details of that project, you can visit www.voteforus.org.ph. That website was actually launched in June 2021. Next slide, please. The open election data includes the following sections: voter registration, procurement activities, election calendar, Comelec resolutions, videos or short video clips with voter education as the general theme. And in the future, depending on the information to be provided by the Comelec, subject of NAMFREL's request, we would also monitor and observe the qualifications and experience of the candidates for the benefit of all the voters. We will also monitor and review the statements of contributions and expenses of the candidates or SOSE, and we will also take a look at the other videos related to the elections. Next slide, please. NAMFREL has originally been known for its Operation Quick Count, which entailed the collection of copies of election returns from voting precincts nationwide. And then this is followed by the three-level tabulation of the precinct results: municipal canvassing, provincial canvassing, and then national canvassing. We also publish the tabulation results at regular intervals. Next slide, please. In the 4 national and local elections held using an AES, that would be 2010, 13, 16, and 19, more and more organizations, including other accredited citizens' arms, political parties, and media, have been doing their own parallel vote tabulation and publishing the results. And there's really no need for NAMFREL to duplicate that effort. Next slide, please. Next slide. For the 2022 national and local elections, what NAMFREL proposes is the printing of QR codes on the election returns, specifically 4 QR codes. The results of national positions, local positions, party list, precinct statistics, and metadata. Next slide, please. Next slide. NAMFREL plans to employ crowdsourcing of election results. ERs are required to be posted outside of the precincts. Anybody can take a photo of the QR codes, and for this purpose, NAMFREL will provide a platform to gather submissions by citizens in an orderly manner. In other words, all the QR codes that have been taken a picture of will be submitted, and NAMFREL will receive that and gather them in a platform for submissions by the citizens. Election results will be made publicly accessible. Individual candidates and our political parties and other interested individuals or groups may download the results, do their own canvassing and consolidation even, then compare the results with those published by media and other parties, as well as the official results to be published by Comelec. So you can do your own checking and monitoring of the results. Next slide, please. The project is largely dependent on Comelec's decision to adopt the proposal to print the 4 QR codes on the election returns. However, there is no indication as yet that the proposal will be approved and therefore implemented. Next slide. The other project is the random manual audit. The random manual audit, or RMA, is a post-election activity mandated by law to be performed immediately following the elections. One clustered precinct, according to the law, shall be randomly selected per legislative district. The ballots will be manually read, the votes tallied, and the results compared with the election returns. Based on previous RMA rules, if there is a variance of 10 votes between the VCM count, the vote counting machine count, as reflected in the ERs, and the manual count, the VCM shall be subject to further investigation for the root cause of the difference. Next slide, please. Next slide. For the 2022 national and local elections, an average of 3 clustered precincts, at least 1 to a maximum of 5 per legislative district, and there are 253 such districts, will be chosen at random based on the size of the legislative district. RMA, or the random manual audit, will entail manual reading of the ballots per ballot box. The innovation for the 2022 national and local elections is that there will be a QR code on the VVPAT that will be read and the votes counted per VVPAT to be matched with the election returns. VVPAT is the voter verifiable paper audit trail. Next slide, please. Next. This RMA activity is open for public observation, and NAMFREL will deploy volunteers to participate in the RMA activity. Next slide. Next. We would like to invite you to be a NAMFREL volunteer. We may be reached at telephone 632-8451-1586. And that ends my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gus Lagman. Our next speaker is Dr. William Yu, who is a faculty member at the Ateneo de Manila University, from where he received his PhD in computer science. He has served on Comelec Advisory Council, which recommends the most appropriate, secure, applicable, and cost-effective technology to be applied in the Automation Election System, or AES, for national and local elections. Dr. Yu has published extensively in his field and is a member of several professional associations. He speaks to us today in his capacity as board member of the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting, or PPCRV. Dr. Yu, please.
Right, so thank you very much for inviting me to do this event, and I'd also like to thank you for listening as well. And I'd like to thank Mr. Lagman as well, because then I can shorten my presentation, because we're doing quite a lot of things that that NAMFREL is doing as well. So quick presentation on my end. So basically the title is Protecting Your Vote. So we at the PPCRV have been a champion of clean, honest, accurate, meaningful, and peaceful elections since 1991. So we call that CHAMP elections. At the PPCRV, we have a threefold mandate. So we have recently received our Comelec accreditation for the 2022 elections, and we basically have three mandates. One is voters education, the second one is poll watching, and the third one is what we call the unofficial parallel count. So in terms of voters education, so our first mandate is basically to train or to educate the population. So pre-election, so at this particular moment, we are running a series of voters education campaigns. You will see on the screen right now is an example of our technical series, which we call It's Good to Know, where we focus on the technical aspects of the election and the election system. As Director James mentioned a while ago, a lot of concerns with respect to the automated election system boil down to knowledge of this particular system, and that is why we decided to create a program specifically for this. And that's what you see on the screen right now. But of course, elections and voters education is not limited to the technical aspects of the election, but really it's about values formation, right? So the values part of our program, which is called Iboboto Ko Maka-Pilipinas. So we are running this campaign right now, basically to focus mostly on values for formation. Here we focus on the 6 good citizenship values with respect to elections. They can be divided into 4 parts. The first part, which we call Makadios. The second part, which we call Makatao. The third one, Makabayan, and Kalikasan, right? So these are the 4 main groups, and we focus on citizens' values education. We've started this campaign last year, and we are going through it strongly, right? And here are some pictures of our Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao Train the Trainers program. All right. So here's our Train the Trainers program. So you would see that we focus mostly on training our volunteers and coordinators within the region so that they can cascade this training program. And of course, all the material presented right now can also be accessed by any group who would actually like to use this material to focus and help with the voters' education campaign. So this is the YouTube channel for all the educational materials. You can scan the QR code presented here to visit the channel. Thank you very much, and please like and subscribe as well. Right? In addition to that, we do have our normal digital channels, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And the next slide is basically a number of screenshots of our Facebook presences of PPCRV. So of course, we have the national PPCRV Facebook page, Twitter account, and Instagram accounts, but we also have per diocese, right? And in some cases, even parishes have their own PPCRV accounts. And that is just an example of some of the accounts that we have, right? And there are many. So we encourage people to follow the parish-based accounts because that's where our strongest unit of cooperation is at the parish level, right? Now I move on to the second of our threefold mandate, which is basically called poll watching, right? So poll watching nowadays is not just physical poll watching, but digital poll watching as well. So here are some of activities. So first off, we do things like the source code review, right? So some of the screenshots you will see here. So we're doing the source code review. We attended the final trusted build, as Mr. Lagman mentioned. One was performed yesterday. We also do system walkthroughs. So for example, when major components of the election system are tested, we also participate during the walkthrough. We participate in the mock elections. We also attend the packaging and logistics activities. This is a picture, the upper right is a picture of the prelat, right? So this is in the Santa Rosa warehouse. And in addition to that, we also participate when there are concerns, for example, with respect to the election system. So we do contribute our expertise as well, such as the NE incident and the 7R glitch, and the more recent, for example, Comelec hack mentioned a while ago, right? The next slide will also show the Voters Assistance Desk, which is another major activity and service that the PPCRV does. Okay, it takes a while for the slide to move. But the Voters Assistance Desk basically allows voters to walk up to the desk so that they will know which classrooms they're supposed to vote. Now, the Voters Assistance Desk would also help voters, for example, if they have special needs. So, for example, in previous elections, there are not all voting centers would have accessible polling places. So, for example, in these few screenshots here, you will see our volunteers, for example, carry wheelchairs up to the second floor or the third floor of a voting center simply because they didn't have accessible polling places. But I believe the Director James has mentioned a while ago that all voting centers will have an accessible polling place. So at least we just have to push the wheelchair na lang, which is a lot easier than bringing up the wheelchairs sa stairs, like these pictures show. We also participate in a number of activities, including poll watching, right? So I don't have any pictures of poll watching per se, because we're not allowed to take a picture inside the precinct, but I am showing some pictures. The next slide will show some pictures about some of our roving volunteers, right? So whether through motorcycle or through boat or through donkey, we will go to where we are needed, right? So if you notice, the upper right picture is our volunteers joining Comelec and logistics personnel, bring vote counting machines, and in this case, ballot boxes actually, to a precinct or to an island precinct in the Basulta area, right? So there are many, many activities where our volunteers participate as well. And the third and the last of our threefold mandate is what we call the unofficial parallel count. So the unofficial parallel count basically focuses on performing a count, comparing the digital result that comes from the transparency server here and the printed ER that comes from the VCM. Now, anybody technically can do this because they ERs are actually posted at the precinct, right, the door of the precinct. And at the same time, there's a Comelec public access website. But what we do is we do this as a service for the whole nation, right? So all our volunteers will pick up the 4th copy of the electronic returns, and basically that is what we use to compare. So in summary, our mandate here is basically to perform the count using transparency server data on one end, that's the digitally transmitted data, and we compare it with the printed paper copies that is before transmission, so before it passes any other server. We compare the two copies. The reason we do this is we'd like to check against something called electronic dagdag bawas, right? If any of the servers or any of the systems in the middle between the VCM and the canvassing servers would have changed the data. And that's why this is an important step in checking the integrity of the elections. The next slide will show a sample of the electronic returns, right? So our volunteers connect the 4th copy of the electronic returns. This is called a pre-transmission copy, which is basically a copy that is obtained before the network connection is connected to the vote counting machine. So this is what we call a pristine copy. So if the final testing and sealing activities seal the machine, there's no network connection whatsoever in the machine. We print a copy, we take the copy, and that is when transmission happens after we obtain the 4th copy of the returns. These are labeled, sealed, and sent to our command center for encoding. So here's a diagram that shows what essentially happens. So the VCM, right? So the VCM will send the electronic returns to the Municipal Board of Canvassers, the central server, and the transparency server. We obtain a copy of the electronic returns from the transparency server, so our command center gets a copy. We also get the paper-based returns, and that is what we compare. So if you notice, this electronic return passes through many systems, and this check, this manual check, is basically to ensure that the results have not been tampered in any step of this particular process, right? So that is why we do this unofficial parallel count. And here are some pictures of the unofficial parallel count. So we have some pictures here of our volunteers collecting the electronic returns. Okay, that's all right. There you go. So collecting the electronic returns, we have to sort them as well. We have to sort, categorize, and catalog them properly. Most of the time, it is already sorted properly, but sometimes it's not, especially kung they are submitted directly from the precincts, especially those who are near our command center. Then, of course, the electronic returns are encoded, and these are samples of our encoding. So both old and young, all volunteer to be encoders as well, aside from volunteers who pick up the results. And here are more pictures of our command center. So we do have about 100 seats for encoding. We do what is called a double blind pass encoding. So it's encoded twice, randomly by random people, so that the encoding result is checked. And there is a quality assurance desk as well, which is manned by volunteers from the San Jose Seminary who have graciously offered their time as well. Right, so that's a quality assurance portion. Okay, and these are the results of the unofficial parallel count for 2019. Right, so we were able to encode 60,139 out of approximately 87,000. So that is about 68.70%. And the match rate is 99.995, right? So it's a very high degree of matches. We only found 3 ERs with an off by 1 error, which we have escalated to the Comelec as well. Just as a note, in 2016, being a presidential elections, we were actually able to collect and encode over 73%. So we actually collected and encoded less in 2019 than in 2016, but hopefully in 2022, we should be able to get more if we get more volunteers as well. So we are really dependent on volunteers for this. Okay, so that is a summary of our threefold mandate, and I would just like to make some parting words. Let me click them all. So there's some screen delay. So first of all, we would like to call attention if we could have an alternative to what we call bearer-based controls, because right now, whoever has the ballot box, the machines, and the keys, right, the I button, the pins, etc., can control the election at that particular precinct, and that is the reason why we encourage poll watchers. because then if poll watchers are in that particular precinct, then malfeasance in those precincts can and not be done. That is also the reason why we have to do unofficial parallel counts as well to compare results when they're transmitted. So we are very, very dependent on poll watchers in the precinct. Not only do they watch the precinct during final testing and sealing and the election day itself, but they are also the ones who pick up the fourth copy for transmission to our headquarters. The second parting word that I'd like to give is better transparency as well. So a lot of issues are clearly explainable if it's clear to stakeholders. So for example, there are a lot of activities like the local source code review, the pre-lat, the final testing and sealing, and the RMA that would be better appreciated by people if there was a lot more transparency. Third is a better preparation as well. So some of the issues that we've encountered in the past, such as the 7-hour glitch, can be addressed with better preparation. And second to the last is, of course, we would like to have more options for election system providers. And of course, if possible, a venue for local players to participate, right? So choice is good in our view. And last but not the least, we need a means to better address pre-election issues such as vote buying and disinformation campaigns, which are not as easy to resolve, right? And that is it for my presentation, and I'd like to thank you all for listening. So we from the PPCRV would like to call on volunteers as well. So as we say, volunteers always welcome. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Yu. Our final speaker is Justice Antonio Carpio, retired Senior Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Carpio's distinguished legal career began with his graduating valedictorian of his class in the College of Law of the University of the Philippines, placing 6th in the 1975 bar examinations. He was sworn in as member of the Supreme Court in 2001, one of the youngest appointees as Associate Justice. His record in the court is legendary, penning a phenomenal number of decisions, dissenting opinions, concurring opinions, separate opinions, and concurring and dissenting opinions, a feat unmatched in the history of the court. Justice Carpio is recently known for his extensive writing and lecturing on the West Philippine Sea issue. He is one of the founding conveners and chairperson of Isambayan, in which capacity he speaks to us this afternoon. Justice Carpio.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. All the election paraphernalia, including the ballots and flashcards for the May 2022 elections, will be delivered to all precincts nationwide by one company, F2, a logistics company owned by Dennis Sui of Davao City. I can see 3 vulnerabilities in the automated election system that will be used in the May 2022 national elections. The first vulnerability is that the flashcards, which contain the operating system and are specific to each precinct, will be in the hands of F2 from the time they're taken from the Comelec warehouses in Metro Manila to the time they are delivered to each precinct nationwide. There is a possibility that the flashcards could be tampered by unscrupulous persons along the way or even before they are delivered to F2. In short, the flashcards could be tampered to print out predetermined results of the election returns of a precinct. The random manual audit, or RMA, to be conducted immediately after the close of voting hours on election day should uncover any tampering of the flashcard. The RMA is a physical count of the actual ballots cast in a specific precinct, and in case of conflict, the RMA count should prevail over the results of the machine-printed election returns. Any variance would indicate tampering of the flashcards. Thus, it is very important that the RMA, the random manual audit, should be faithfully conducted right after the close of voting hours on election day. The PPCRV and all political parties and NGOs should ensure that the random manual audit is conducted timely and properly. Moreover, the law allows a minimum of only 2 precincts per legislative district that will be subjected to random manual audit. This should be doubled, and we should all petition the Comelec to double the precincts per legislative district to be subjected to random manual audit. The random manual audit must be conducted as required by law at the close of voting hours on the day of the election itself. The precincts to be subjected to RMA must be chosen on election day itself randomly in the presence of representatives of the political parties. In the last 2 elections, the random manual audit was conducted several days after election day. We all know that after election day, nobody bothers to watch the ballot boxes or the voting machines, which are all dumped in the offices of the municipal or city treasurer for storage. Many things can happen to all the ballots and the voting machines while on storage in these offices. Obviously, we must all ensure that the random manual audit should be conducted at the close of voting hours on election day, before the ballots and voting machines are brought to the storage areas of the municipal or city treasurer. The second vulnerability is that the electronic transmission of the election returns from the precinct to the automated election system servers may be hacked as the electronic transmission moves from one transmission tower to another. This is the problem of the so-called 7-hour glitch. However, at every precinct, after the close of voting hours, signed copies of the computer-generated paper election returns are given by the Board of Election Inspectors to the representatives of the political parties. Signed copies of the election returns may also be secured by other interested parties. It is thus easy for the political parties to check during the canvassing later on the correctness of the results stated in the certificates of canvass that will be issued by the district, municipal, city, and provincial board of canvassers. The representatives of the political parties must therefore be vigilant in thwarting any attempt to tamper with the results stated in the city and provincial certificates of canvass, which will be the primary document used by Congress sitting as the National Board of Canvassers for the President and Vice President, and by the Comelec sitting as the National Board of Canvassers for Senators in proclaiming the winning President, Vice President, and Senators. The results from the automated election system servers will not be used as basis to proclaim the winning candidates. So it's very clear. The winning candidates will be proclaimed on the basis of the certificates of canvass, the paper certificate of canvass, not the AES results in the AES servers. The third vulnerability is that some ballots may be pilfered while being delivered to the precincts. The number of ballots correspond to the number of voters in a precinct. However, because of the pandemic, many voters may not vote on election day. Unscrupulous persons may pilfer up to 5 or 7 or 10% of the ballots in a precinct and ask voters in that precinct allied with them to feed the pilfered ballots into the machine. The ballots are specific to a designated precinct and cannot be used in any other precinct. The poll watchers of the political parties must be vigilant and ensure that the ballots are counted upon delivery to the precinct, and if there is a shortage, then they should watch all voters when voting for possible insertion of the missing or pilfered ballots. Now, what are the measures being considered by Isambayan to protect the votes in the May 2022 national elections? Isambayan, through its chapters nationwide and in cooperation with other organizations like IT schools, will field at least 2 poll watchers in every precinct, or about 190,000 volunteers nationwide, to ensure 3 things. First, that the ballots delivered at every precinct are counted before the start of the voting, and that there are no missing ballots. If there are missing ballots, then the poll watchers will watch with eagle eyes any voter who may insert, when voting, more than one ballot into the machine. Second, our poll watchers, through a smartphone app, will take photos of the election returns in every precinct and transmit the photos of the election returns to our own national coordinating center that will, using our own software, electronically tally all the election returns. In this way, we can easily verify if the official transmission of the election returns from the precinct to the Comelec servers and to the district, municipal, city, and provincial canvassing boards have been tampered or not. Our centralized tallied election returns per district, municipality, city, and province will be sent through the smartphone app to our poll watchers attending the proceedings in the corresponding canvassing boards. Our poll watchers can thus easily verify if the canvassing results are altered or not. The smartphone app is now being developed by an IT company, which will also make the app available to other political parties and to media organizations. The IT company can provide a full service tallying of election results to interested parties by district, municipality, city, province, or even nationwide. The idea is to crowdsource the protection of the votes. The more organizations using the app, the better. The presence of dozens of poll watchers with smartphones equipped with the app will certainly deter would-be hackers. Third, to ensure that the flashcards are not tampered to print out predetermined results and election returns, our poll watchers will monitor the holding of the random manual audit that is required by law to be conducted at the close of voting hours on election day. The results of the RMA must tally with the election returns, and if they do not, it could show that the flashcards have been tampered. Using the same smartphone app, our poll watchers, if allowed by the Comelec, can also take pictures of the ballots that are manually counted in the random manual audit and send these images of the ballots to our central coordinating office for tallying of the audited ballots and comparing their results with the election returns in the same precinct. So these three poll watching measures: first, the verification of the number of ballots delivered at every precinct. Second, the taking of photos of the election returns at every precinct. And third, the monitoring of the conduct of the random manual audit will deter and prevent cheating, safeguard the votes of our candidates, and ensure fair, clean, and honest elections in May 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Justice Carpio, and thank you to the speakers. We have some time for questions, but while we are monitoring the chat box, maybe I will allow the speakers to respond to each other. I think certain issues were raised that might deserve a response from the other speakers. Would anyone want to make a comment, for instance, on the vulnerabilities, what your agencies are doing, what Comelec is doing? And I noticed there were certain proposals made to Comelec. I wonder if Director James will be in a position to answer these at this time.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes, actually, the proposal that needs to be brought up before the commission, of course, will be with regard to the number of random manual audit sites. If I'm not mistaken, Comelec has already expanded the number of random manual audit sites in the past. I'll have to check where we're at right now to see how we can harmonize that with the proposal of Justice Carpio. With regard to the other issues that Justice Carpio raised, those have been addressed by the Comelec at other venues as well. I wouldn't want to argue the point here, particularly with regard to decisions made by the Comelec as to its contractors. But otherwise, the Comelec has actually pointed out that that there are multiple checks on the process that we believe will safeguard the integrity of the election supplies and paraphernalia, particularly the SD cards. Other than that, if there are any other questions, of course, I'd be willing to answer them.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to what the Director James mentioned. So the current selection criteria for RMA precinct. So by law, as Mr. Lagman mentioned, it is only one per legislative district. What has been happening in the last few elections is it would become 1 to 3 per congressional district proportional. So if the congressional district is large, it will be 3 clustered precincts for that particular congressional district. If that congressional district is small, then it would be 1. So it is from 1 to 3, right? Thank you.
Actually, the law requires 2 precincts per legislative district, but in practice, the Comelec has been conducting only 1 precinct per legislative district. So I think we can demand that the minimum allowed by law should be followed, but we should double it because 2 per legislative districts or a total of about 700 precincts nationwide would be too small. If we double it, it will be better, it will be more reflective, and it will discourage people because, this is just a deterrent. We cannot monitor all the precincts. So if the precincts that we will conduct subject to random manual audit will be randomized and at least 4 per legislative districts, well, that will be probably enough to deter people from tampering with the flashcards.
Any comments, Mr.
Actually,
Lagman?
yeah, I think the law says or mandates 1 for every legislative district. However, Comelec has been using 3.
2 to 3.
About 3, 700 to 800 precincts instead of how many precincts? How many are there? 253, no? Legislative districts. I think they get about 3, mga 700 to 800.
Yeah, 700 because the law says 2 per district. So that's why you have 700. But I would think that is just a minimum. If the Comelec can do it, we can double that just to deter further any anomalies in the flashcard.
I think we can start with the chat questions in the chat box, which Milet Tindero will be reading out. But let me start with one that was sent in earlier. And this is a question from the Technological Institute of the Philippines. This is an election period like no other. With the current pandemic and the more aggressive use of social media and technology, what would you consider are the new challenges faced in ensuring free and fair elections in May? In other words, are there new and unique challenges today, and what are they? This is addressed to all the speakers. Is this unique? Is this election unique? Are there unique challenges, and what are they, and what should we do about them?
There were mock elections. What was that, James?
29
December 29.
Also the Palawan elections,
March.
there was already the pandemic, di ba?
Yes.
And they managed to make everybody safe in Palawan. So I guess the Comelec already has in place procedures to make all the voters safe.
So what would some of those, I think that's a question. Milet, do you have a question on COVID? I think there are some questions on COVID.
Maybe James can...
Milet?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, we'll proceed with the COVID questions. This is directed to Director Jimenez. Is there any plan to allow COVID positive individuals to vote? And what happens to the voting location should there be a COVID surge?
All right. Number one, we are not going to turn away people who are COVID positive. I think it's important to phrase it that way because a lot of people feel that if you have COVID, then some method should be made available for the ballot to come to you. That's not going to happen. However, if a person turns out to be COVID positive but still is at the polling place, they will be allowed to vote. And that's precisely the reason why we have isolation polling places. People will be scanned upon arrival at the voting center, and if they're found to be with COVID or suspected to have COVID, they will still be allowed to vote. The other question is, what happens if there is a COVID surge? It would be helpful to see COVID surges as one possible reason for a suspension of elections in that particular area. Remember, the law authorizes the Comelec to suspend elections if the conditions for free and fair elections do not exist in a particular place. So in the past, this has happened, for example, if the polling places have been flooded, for example, or if the boards of election inspectors have not shown up, or that the materials used for elections are for some reason unavailable. What happens in those cases is that the elections are suspended until such time that the cause for the suspension is removed. So if you apply that to COVID, for example, what happens is that your board of election inspectors are all struck with COVID and are unable to attend their duties, for example, and no replacements are easily found, then you might have to suspend the elections in that place for that time. This is not the same kind of suspension that some quarters have been pushing, where they want to suspend the elections large scale and for a long period of time. This is not going to happen. If we're going to suspend elections, again, it's simply to accommodate the problem brought about by COVID, again, such as when the boards of election inspectors are unable to attend their duties because of COVID, but will only last for as long as it takes for us to get replacement boards of election inspectors. So again, the short answer is yes, there is a way for COVID to impact the holding of elections, but no, it will not be in the same character as some people have been trying to make it out to be.
Thank you. Any more questions, Milet?
Yes, to Director Jimenez again.
Yes,
This
ma'am.
is in relation to security.
Yes, go ahead.
With the reported hacking and what happened in 2019 with the 7-hour glitch,
Okay.
what improvements has the Comelec made to ensure that the security and legitimacy of the results of the 2022 elections, given also that previously there was an issue on discrepancies in the results that led to BBM to file for a recount?
Okay. I will be asking Dr. Yu to jump in at some point during this particular phase of the discussion. But first, let's talk about hacking. Number one, when we talk about hacking, I would say that we were hacked in 2016. We are still validating whether, in fact, we were hacked in 2022. The claim of hacking in 2022 still has to be validated. And as we said earlier, there seems to be no evidence that such hacking occurred this time. We're taking it very seriously, and we're doing everything we can to validate these reports. However, we have learned our lessons from 2016, and we have taken our databases offline, which means that they are no longer susceptible to hacking. Of course, given time and opportunity, any database can be penetrated. But again, as I said, we've undertaken many hardening measures to prevent that sort of thing from happening again. Among these hardening measures, of course, is placing the Comelec website within the confines of the firewalls of the DICT itself. As far as the other methods of securing the elections are concerned, when we talk about discrepancies, I really don't know what you're talking about, because the Supreme Court itself held that there were no such problems with the last elections, and that in fact we've had elections since 2010, and up to now there has been no proof of any wrong results. Okay, the fact that someone filed a protest is not proof that something went wrong. It is only proof that someone wanted to find out if something actually did go wrong as they claim. And that's what happened here. In the The protest you adverted to was actually ruled authoritatively by the Presidential Electoral Tribunal to be a non-starter. Now, as to the glitch was not the result of a hack. It was not the result of any intrusion. This has been proven by experts time and again. But what happened was that there was a problem with some procedures that led to the glitch taking too long to resolve, too long for comfort of everyone to resolve. But ultimately, the fact that it happened really did not impact the outcome of the elections. At this point, I'd like to toss it to Dr. William Yu, who is better equipped to discuss that part of this story.
So the 7-hour glitch upon our investigation in 2019 was due to a particular module that exported the files to poll watchers and political parties. This particular module had, let's just say, was not designed to handle the particular volume of load of the electronic return transmissions during the time at quote-unquote nabulunan siya. Now, one of the things that Comelec did was basically, as part of the source code review for this particular election, was a review of that particular module to check and ensure that that particular code can scale to the requirements of this up-and-coming election. The second activity that they are still to do, but they have promised that they would do, is they would subject the system to a load test, right? So the actual source code for that particular module and all the modules in the election will be subject to a load test as well, right? So I hope that helped. Thank you.
Can I say
Darren,
something?
I noticed a number of questions here about possible coordination between the watchdog agencies and Isambayan. Is this going on? Are there talks? Like, would you be interested in using this phone app that Justice Carpio mentioned? So what kind of coordination is there between the volunteer groups? Dr. Yu, Dr.
Yes,
Lagman.
Yes, so allow me to take that first. So we are open to volunteers, right? So as long as the only requirement we have in our particular case is that the volunteer must be non-partisan. So that's a requirement as part of our Comelec accreditation. So we can't have volunteers endorsing particular candidates. The second thing, a special rule for those who are in the polling place or for specific poll watchers, they must be of voting age, right? So those are the two requirements we have. Now we are a parish-based right now. So what happens is our volunteers tend to register at the parishes. So we're not a big centralized organization. So we are open to any volunteers of many shapes and sizes. Then in the Muslim Mindanao area, we do have partnerships with various CSO groups to cover that at particular part of the country as well. But yes, we are open to dialogue, and the only constraint would be non-partisan. Thank you.
Someone noticed that there were, in your pictures, Dr. Yu, there were children in front of the machines. Were they volunteers?
Yes, po, ma'am. So the only constraint for age, at least in the past elections, was that the poll watcher has to be a registered voter. So we can't put a poll watcher inside the polling place that is not a registered voter. However, we have many other activities, right? We do have the encoding activity, the voters education activity, where in some cases our adult volunteers would bring their children or their grandchildren to help with the activity and making it a family.
Because they're more techies, right? They're techie, right?
Yes, and also one of the reasons why some of our volunteers do that is to battle this culture of apathy in the youth right now. So there's a lot of disenfranchised youth who feel that they should not vote because their votes don't matter. They should not vote because it doesn't change anything. And we'd like to start them early, right? At least this minor activity as part of the electoral process. We would hope that would encourage them to be more participative in future activities. Thank you.
More questions, Millet?
Yes, ma'am. Again, a question to Director Jimenez. Is the Comelec experiencing political pressure in its deliberations and operations?
No. No, we are not.
And in line with the COVID surge and its uncertainties, are we going to have online voting or expand the day of voting?
No,
Yeah, that's a
unfortunately,
good question.
yeah. Unfortunately, when we talk about alternative means of voting, we're going to need legislation for that. So we did try to get some sort of legislation passed before that would allow us to do, among other things, postal voting. Unfortunately, these legislative initiatives failed to materialize, so we won't be able to do alternative means of voting. So tuloy pa rin po tayo sa in-person voting.
But what about extension of hours? Because things will go a little bit more slowly, won't they?
Yes,
With
ma'am.
social distancing.
Totoo po yan. And one of the things that we are planning on, that we are going to do, is we're going to have a 12-hour voting day minimum, right? Which means that we're going to start at 6, probably end at 6 p.m. as well. But this will be extendable, obviously. For as long as there are people in queue at the time, then we will conduct voting.
That's reassuring. Thank you.
Okay. More questions? This is for Chairman Lagman and Dr. Yu. How do you plan to maximize the use of social media to engage more Filipino voters to become watchdogs for the upcoming national elections?
You
Well,
have to get them motivated to really volunteer.
Yes, NAMFREL has its website, and it's, volunteers can volunteer to that website, and we have chapters. We have chapter chairmen who are working on that all over the country. So, and we don't need as many as what we had in 1986, especially because we're only talking of the random manual audit. So we are not going to, except for poll watching, which is done already by other accredited organizations. So we don't want to duplicate what others are already doing. So we concentrate on things, on the gaps. Like I said, we're the only ones that's doing the random manual audit at this time. So we concentrate on that. So, William, I think you.
Dr. Yu?
Yep. So on the part of PPCRV, we've always had Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and website. So we've tried as much as we can to use social media. Now, what we're doing for this particular cycle is we're taking a different tack. So if you notice, we have redesigned the content we use to try to make it more appealing to younger viewers. So we are, and again, we're open to suggestions, right? I mean, we're a volunteer group after all. So for example, in 2019, we brought in popular sports stars, basketball players, artists, for example, to help us become ambassador, just to engage more. In for this cycle, we've changed the content. We're trying to make it more engaging. So we're trying. We're also trying to access other platforms like Kudu and some other social media platforms that are not in the mainstream. But that's still a work in progress for us, right? So there are a number of activities we try, but we might not be the target market, so we might have to get more younger volunteers as well. One of the things we find very successful is we do have a PPCRV youth group that tends to be able to relate more to people of that particular age group as well. So that's what we're trying to encourage as well. And most of the volunteers tend to be school-based as opposed to parish-based. Hope that helped.
Yes, Director James.
Well, the citizens' arms are not the only one, not the only ones on social. Comelec is on TikTok as well. I'm pretty proud of that. We don't do dancing, but we hope to be informative as well. And we also launched our e-rally channel today. So
Yeah, tell us more about that one.
Yes, po. If you could give it a follow, that would be very helpful. Basically, the e-rally channel will allow us to stream the e-rallies of national candidates so that on a nightly basis, the public can tune in and watch the e-rallies of these candidates. This will allow them to have some means of reaching out to the voters so that they're not relying too heavily on in-person campaigns. In-person campaigns, as you can tell, is a flashpoint for COVID. So we want to make sure that we're sort of guiding them away from that model onto social media. Again, using our e-rally channel that be open to everyone. And if you're not on Facebook, because a lot of people are not on Facebook, you can follow the same streams on YouTube, and again, as I said earlier, hopefully on TikTok. So we're trying to reach as many social media platforms as possible para mas maraming makapanood.
May I ask Justice Carpio if Isambayan has the same privileges as the official watchdog agencies? Are there things that you would like to be granted by Comelec to Isambayan that PPCRV and NAMFREL possess?
No, we do not have the same privileges. We rely on our candidates because candidates can have poll watchers. Our members of our coalition can have poll watchers. So we rely on them. So when we form our army of poll watchers, they will be carrying the IDs of their political parties.
Political. I understand. Thank you. Any other? Yes, Milet. What else is on the chat box?
There is a question here for Justice Carpio. With the availability of critical information to more people, wouldn't it be vulnerable to various interpretations, whether with the intent of informing or disinforming? And that being said, how can we ensure that the people, example, the developer, the political parties, the media, who have access to the apps, moreover, the election data, will only ensure and help facilitate the transparency of the election?
Well, the app will be available to all political parties, to media organizations, to television networks, and the IT company that developed the app will provide the software to tally all of these election returns. It will be done by the computer. It will not be done manually, and so everybody will have the same result. And we're not the only ones doing it. You have PPCRV, and people can compare. And because let's say one political party will have access to the app, they have their own results also. They can check the results of the canvas with their own computation, and another party can do it also. So it will be like crowdsourcing. Nobody has a monopoly, and everybody, whoever wants to hack it will have a big problem, because everything will be open to the public in a way.
I see that we're at 5:50. I want to give an opportunity for the speakers to have one last, perhaps a parting message to the voters. So can we ask if there's something that you would, you'd really want to tell the voters about their duty and responsibility this coming elections, aside from soliciting volunteers? Director James, you want to start?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for inviting me, the Comelec, to join this forum. It's a very welcome forum indeed, especially since we're reaching a lot of people with our words right now. We'd like to remind everyone to please actually go out and vote. A lot of people mobilized to register, and a lot of people are politically activated, but all of that will be for naught if you do not actually go out and vote. So please make sure that you actually go out to vote on May 9, 2022. Thank you very much.
Justice Carpio.
Thank you. I've been chair of the House of Representatives Electoral Tribunal, the Senate Electoral Tribunal, and acting chair of the Presidential Electoral Tribunal. And we have handled the election protests involving the automated election system. And I can say with confidence that up to now, nobody has found a way to hack the automated election system. When we conduct a protest, when we go over the ballots, we do a manual recount of the ballots. So there's a manual physical recount of the ballots. That's one source. Then we print out the picture image of the ballots in the flashcard. When you insert your ballot into the machine, the machine will take a picture of your ballot, and that's stored in the flashcard. And we print that out. And you have also the printed election return. So we have three sources. And so far, they all have jibed. Because they all jibe, that means nobody has found a way to hack the system up to now.
Reassuring.
So I can say that with confidence. In all of these election protests, all the results of the physical recount, all the results of the printed images in the flashcard, and the election results, they all jibe. So nobody has found a way. But there is always a first time. And that's why we have developed this app, just to assure the public that there are people watching. And those who want to hack the system will have a hard time because we will be watching them. So that's really the purpose. We're doing this not because we believe there has been hacking in the past. Nobody has hacked the system as far as I'm concerned. So we have developed this app just to reassure the public and to deter people from hacking. Thank you.
That's a very good message. Someone is watching. Gus, some parting words?
Well, I still dream of the day when watchdogs will no longer be
necessary. Yeah.
In other words, if less candidates would cheat, if everybody, all of the voters, would watch the polls anyway, then perhaps organized watchdogs will no longer be necessary. But like I said, I dream of it.
Okay.
Our
dream too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gus. Dr. Yu?
Yes, so I echo the sentiment of Miss Sister Lagman, right? I mean, it would be better if we were not necessary, right? But until then, we would be here. Now, the thing that we'd like to ask for is we do have a lot of voters education material, and we'd like your help as well and various organizations to distribute them. It is my understanding that this group is mostly composed of educators.
Schools, yes.
So it would be the perfect venue, right? So all the material is free, all the material is readily available. I posted it in my slides. In case you need more information, you can get in touch with us as well, right? There are many organizations already that have used that material, but I think it is important. So not just the technical aspects of, poll watching and the system, but also the values formation portion of our program. Then at the same time, of course, in addition, but you did mention, aside from getting more volunteers, we still need a lot of volunteers, right? There will be an estimated 109,000 clustered precincts for this coming election. So if that is 2 poll watchers per clustered precincts, automatically we need 220, right? 220,000 volunteers. So that is a lot of volunteers to cover the magnitude of the task at hand. So we really need volunteers. And that is in addition to our voters assistance desk, the encoding team at the command center, and other activities. And just to echo what Justice Carpio mentioned as well, there are other activities that also need watching, such as the logistics, right? Final testing and sealing. These activities also need watchers, and not just the poll watching activity on election day itself. So thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me as well.
So thank you very much. And I really hope that well that this webinar has reassured us as well as made us more cautious and vigilant about the elections. I'd like to thank our speakers, Director James of Comelec, Director James Jimenez of Comelec, Mr. Gus Lagman of NAMFREL, Dr. William Yu of PPCRV, and Justice Antonio Carpio of Isambayan. So you've certainly given us a lot to think about and a lot to act on. I really hope you're able to recruit volunteers from this large group of educational institutions. We want to thank all of the audience, please, that is here today. And I'd like to invite everybody to our next voter conversation forum, which is on Friday, January 28th, and it's on the truth wars. So we hope to see you then. In the meantime, please vote and vote wisely.